Hey guys, Kingpin here. Welcome to the next episode of Franchise Mode. In case you missed the last episode of the H2O Zone, we actually started making the wetlands. We also learned that beavers have a really key role in actually creating the wetlands in real life, so we started this area with them in mind. It's not all peaceful here, however. We also made a habitat for the American alligator, a truly ferocious reptile of the New World. If you guys enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're on the final push to 1,000, and we're so close to getting there. Taking a more in-depth tour of the wetlands, we're actually going to start off with the second exhibit that we made in the video. This is the American alligator. We have a large male and two smaller females in there, and they have just enough space. Matter of fact, they actually had offspring in the last episode. We put them in the trade center. There's not enough room for them. If you'll follow the path along, you'll then find the beaver's indoor enclosure. If you keep following the path, you'll find the beaver's outdoor enclosure, starting with their underwater viewing. Like I said before, in real life, beavers can be accredited to the creation of a lot of the wetlands in the world, especially in America, so I decided to make them an extra large exhibit to thank them for their efforts. Without them, we wouldn't have a wetlands. In the back of the beaver enclosure, you can actually see the American alligator through here. It's a little bit tricky, but if you looked on the heat map, he was there. Continuing up this ramp to get to the top of the beaver's enclosure, you'll then be greeted with the beaver enclosure, obviously, but you also have a really good view of the gators. From here you can see the beaver's dams. Despite having an amazing wetlands exhibit, today we're finally going to fix this giant pit in the center of the zoo. It's been an eyesore for far too long. We'll return to the wetlands in a later episode, but for now, we need to get this thing fixed. Let's do it in the morning. Today we're going to be building for the Pygmy Hippo, which if you didn't know, you can only have accessed if you pre-ordered the console edition. I have no idea how you would have gone about getting it on the PC edition. If somebody knows, please let me know in the comments, I'm kinda curious. But to reiterate, if you didn't pre-order the game, sadly you don't have access to this animal. The reason that it took so long to fill this giant empty space right in the center of the zoo is honestly because I had no idea what to put here. At first I wanted to put the king penguins here and have a tunnel that goes underground. Then I wanted to put real hippos here, not the pygmies. Then I decided to maybe put something North American here, like the California sea lion. But this area is just a weird shape. It's a medium-sized area, but it's not big enough to have a really good inside portion. The Pygmy Hippo is a perfect-sized animal for it, however, and I'm thinking this exhibit is going to turn out really well. They don't need a deep dive, and they only need about 250 square meters of land and water. Overall, this exhibit is incredibly basic. Where we're building currently is going to be their main indoor viewing portion, with a slight backstage area. This is where the zookeepers are going to be able to access the exhibit, and where the Pygmy Hippos are going to be able to get away from the public eye. On the opposite side of this is going to be where the underwater viewing is for the Pygmy Hippos. It'll be the very first thing a guest can be able to see as soon as he or she enters the zoo. I thought this would be a really cool feature. We do have one slight problem, however. Pygmy hippos and the greater flamingos that are on this side of the zoo are both from Africa, and originally, the entire left side of the H2O zone was going to be dedicated to African animals. I was going to build something out of an oasis, maybe like a watering hole type exhibit, that would house a bunch of different African species, from water buffalo, Cape buffalo, giraffes, zebras, springbok, gazelle, gemsbok, elephants. I was going to have a ton of different animals over there. It was going to be probably the crowning jewel of the H2O zone. However, the next DLC was announced today for Planet Zoo. We're going to be getting the Grasslands pack, which is whatever, it's a great pack, but it doesn't necessarily affect us at all. However, we're also getting the Africa pack, so the very next zoo we're going to make is going to be all about Africa. meaning it would be really redundant to make two African-ish zoos back to back, so we're gonna can that idea for now. We're still gonna have some African animals in this zoo, however, I'm thinking we're gonna set our sights more towards Asia now. The center of Primate Conservation was heavily South American themed. We have this zoo, which is a lot of North America, and a lot of the aquatic animals too. It doesn't necessarily have a hard theme besides being aquatic, which lots of animals are aquatic to be frank. However, the African animals are probably going to go on the back burner for a while. That will definitely be our next zoo in the franchise. However, since there's no Asian animals in the future, at least until I think July 30th is the DLC date, we're going to be focusing a lot towards Asian animals since they're not going to have a time to shine for a while. So think less African animals, more red pandas, orangutans, giant pandas, anything from Asia. This part of the build was a little bit tricky. I wasn't quite sure how tall I needed the glass to be, so I actually lured some protesters over here just to ensure that we had a lot of people over here, that we could actually use the glass to accurately measure the height of a person. This way, we could take the entire glass and know exactly how tall it needed to be for when we put the water in the pool. I thought this was a really smart strategy. After that, we replaced the null barriers with glass on the outside at the exact same height. This way, it'll all be equal, and there won't be any areas the Pygmy Hippos can jump over the glass, since it'll all be the exact same height. However, some of it will just be on land, and the other part, which technically is taller, but it goes up to the same height, will be underwater. After we finished adding the basic fence so the hippos couldn't escape, we then had to make them happy. Mainly to get the protesters away, first and foremost, because they were doing a lot of damage to our reputation. The zoo is still relatively new. One thing that I learned is that if you have an area that you really don't want to add a specific detail in, for example, these Pygmy Hippos really liked rocks, and we didn't really have an area where we could nicely add rock terrain, you can actually put it underneath a building. All of the concrete right there has rock underneath it, and the hippos can't detect the concrete, but they can detect the rock, despite it not actually being visible. So if you have to decorate with a material you really don't want to, just hide it underground. You can even do this with heaters, coolers, foliage items, enrichment, pretty much anything you want you can put underground as long as it's within the range of their habitat. The animals are none the wiser. This is how a lot of YouTubers make really realistic looking exhibits and also have their animals happy. Personally, I like to have all the enrichment items out so the animals can play with it all. I really like to see them do it, but I understand the appeal of making a hyper-realistic exhibit. Speaking of this hyper-realistic exhibit, however, right now we're working on the front area where the guests can actually go and see the indoor portion of the Pygmy Hippos. It has thick glass on one side and a door that only the hippos can access. The keepers can't actually get out there. It gives the hippos a little bit of privacy. I thought this was a really creative idea. The keepers have access to the main area where the hippos can be inside, however the outdoor portion of the Pygmy Hippo exhibit is completely their own. This doesn't affect gameplay at all. The keepers can still technically get out there and redo enrichment items, fix feeders, and do anything they need to. However, it looks like it's the hippo's personal thing. It kind of has the same technology as a doggy door in my head. I really wanted to put the enrichment item, like I think it's called a palm frond door, but eventually I had to settle and just go with the door that the animals can push through themselves. Overall, I'm really happy with how this exhibit turned out, but we still have a long way to go. The next thing that you should always do in an exhibit after you have the basic terrain and walls done is add in the foliage. Foliage can be a little bit tricky to have down, but there's a few key tips you can have to make it a lot easier to manage. The very first thing I would do is filter by the animal's needs. You can access this in the animal's menu. It's the same way you access the enrichment items they like. The second thing I would always do when placing foliage, kind of in a natural way, don't necessarily do this with everything like flower beds that needs to look man-made, but if you're trying to make a really natural looking exhibit, always have random rotation on. This makes lily pads, grass, and pretty much anything that you place look that much more realistic because it is completely random. It can be placed in any of the 1 in 360 degrees. It's a really nice feature. Another thing that I recently started doing that I really wish I started sooner was adding concrete to the bottom of pool sections. I think this looks fairly realistic because if you go to any zoo, it's not just a dirt pool with water inside of it. It is just like a real pool that you'd swim in, but animals are in it instead of humans. There's concrete, there's liner, except usually the animals can break through the liner, so 9 times out of 10 it is concrete and rocks. I think this is a really cool effect because it makes the pond look a little bit more natural, but at the same time not entirely natural. The rocks on the outside and the dirt on the outside, as long as the plants, make it look natural. However, the concrete reminds you that this is in fact a zoo. I thought this is a really cool effect, and it really makes exhibits look that much more realistic. It's amazing how such simple details can accomplish this. One more thing you should probably do if you're trying to make a pool for an animal this size is on the decline, which is the slope that the pygmy hippos use to get in and out of the pool, try to add little rocks. This makes the riverbed look a lot more natural. And one other thing that you can do is hit a line to surface, and since your surface is at about a 45-degree angle, meaning a slope going downwards or upwards depending on which area you're looking at it from, the rocks will also be at an angle, which makes it that much more realistic because it looks like the rocks are on an angle, which is the effect you're trying to sell when placing them on a slope. After that, you can even use the align to surface feature to put plants on the sloped rocks. This makes it fairly realistic, because the plants would grow in this way. Speaking of realistic, we probably should learn some real facts about the pygmy hippos that call this exhibit home. To start off, despite being called pygmy, and being much smaller than their larger cousins, the common hippopotamus, they still weigh between 400 and 600 pounds, and stand at about 2.5 to 3.2 feet tall at the shoulders. I really wouldn't call that pygmy. That is quite large. They're native to the forest and swamplands of West Africa, primarily found in Liberia, with small populations in the neighboring countries like Sierra Leone, Guinea, and the Ivory Coast. Unlike the common hippopotamus, pygmy hippos are primarily a nocturnal species, which means they spend most of the day resting in rivers and swamps and becoming active at night to forage for food in the riverbeds. One thing that they do have in common with their cousins is that they are also completely herbivorous, feeding on a variety of plants, fruits, and grasses. Their diet mainly consists of aquatic plants, which they can browse on land or underwater. Unlike the common hippopotamus, pygmy hippos are primarily solitary animals, and typically only will come together for mating purposes. They're also far less aggressive and more secretive in their habits. When I say they're less aggressive, I really mean it too. We haven't talked about the common hippopotamus on this channel yet, but if you know anything about them, it's likely that they are one of the most homicidal animals on the planet. It doesn't matter if you're a baby hippo, a crocodile, elephant, rhino, or even a human. If you're in their territory, they're gonna go ballistic and try to attack you. They are not to be messed with. They have the highest kill count among humans of any animal besides mosquitoes or any disease-carrying bugs. Sadly, pygmy hippos are classified as endangered by the IUCN Red List due to habitat loss and fragmentation, as well as hunting for their meat and their ivory-like teeth. Estimates suggest that there are fewer than 3,000 individuals left in the wild. My personal favorite fact about the common hippopotamus and pygmy hippo alike is actually their adaptations to become surprisingly mobile underwater. If you look at a hippo, it doesn't look like it has a single feature to make it at any bit agile in the water. Take an animal like a duck. They have webbed feet. Take an animal like any sort of fish. They have fins, rudder-like tails, an agile, streamlined body. They look like they would be fast underwater. Hippos, however, didn't have to waste any of their evolution or adaptation time to actually develop these features. Instead, hippos are so dense and so bulky that they're actually effectively fat enough to just sink to the bottom of the water and sprint through it like it's nothing. Imagine running on the moon with zero gravity. This is effectively what hippos are doing. They actually are too big to swim. Whenever you see a video of a hippo charging a boat or anything in the water, it's not like gracefully swimming over to that boat. It is full-on sprinting at them with murderous intent. This is even more interesting when you realize that a hippo's closest living relative isn't exactly what you expect. Take a wild guess. Think in your head of an animal that you think would be closely related to a hippo. Are you thinking of maybe an elephant? Maybe a rhino or something else huge? Maybe even another bulky animal like a gorilla. I don't know what you're thinking. You'd actually be wrong unless you were thinking of dolphins and whales. Hippos are actually heavily related to cetaceans, which are excellent swimmers. It's just a marvel of adaptation. Can't really explain it. Overall, hippos are incredibly interesting animals, and we need to protect them at all costs. One really simple fence design that I've been using a lot lately and I really like is using simply the in-game glass barrier. I've gone on record saying I don't typically like the in-game barriers, and I always would say that null barriers with a custom fence is always better. However, you can pretty much accomplish this with the glass and one-way glass if you just throw a little trim on top of it. Right now, all I'm doing is using a rounded 2-foot long, maybe 2 meter long, I forget the exact term, it looks like 2 meters in the footage, but I'm using a round 2 meter log and just throwing it over top of the plank. I'm then taking the same log, rotating it 90 degrees, and throwing it over the panels. I thought this was a really cool effect. It looks pretty professional, and it looks custom, despite really not being. It's just simply an in-game barrier with some wood on it, and it looks really nice. If you're struggling coming up with the custom barrier, which I don't blame you, it is very difficult. I'm nowhere near a great builder at this game yet, although I'm trying my best learning every day. This is a really effective strategy. If the build doesn't necessarily seem all that detailed in this video, don't worry. I used the other footage I took from this video just as background footage for the video I actually uploaded today, which was the DLC news. Otherwise, you guys just would have been looking at a black empty screen the entire time listening to me talk. So I kind of cut this video up into 2 parts. Think of this as part 1, and then the exhibit is completely finalized in the background of that video. In the next episode of Franchise Mode, probably coming out sometime this weekend if you're watching this live, or at least the day I uploaded it, which is Thursday, you're gonna see the exhibit completely done in the intro of that video. We'll go over completely everything, and we'll do it in pretty good detail. The next episode is likely going to focus on some animal back in the wetlands. Like I said before, originally I had plans for this entire African pavilion in this zoo with a giant watering hole as the centerpiece, but now that the Africa pack is coming out, those plans have been changed and we're probably going to do something Asia related. The problem is, Asian animals don't necessarily gel well with the entire aquatic theme of this zoo. So if you have any idea what we can do to remedy this in the comments, I would love to hear it, because right now, I'm kind of against the wall. Either that, or we start a completely new zoo. Who knows? I really like this one though, but if you guys don't, let me know. Sorry again for the weird format of this video. I'm recording this and editing this the exact same day as I edited and recorded a second video, which was the DLC news, so sorry if things seem a little bit rushed. I've been incredibly busy today, but I just wanted to get this out. Anyways, this is the first entrance to the Pygmy Hippo enclosure, and as you can see them above and below the water. I'm a huge fan of how this turned out, and it's going to be even better in the next episode after it's all detailed up. I'm recording this outro in post. Usually I don't, but I can confidently say that this gets a lot more detailed in the next video. You can see the background footage in the DLC news actually, if you wanted to watch that. Anyways, this is the back side of the exhibit. You can see the entrance of the zookeeper's area, and then you can see the inside portion of the Pygmy Hippo's area. I think it's really cool how you get both perspectives. If you go along the outside, you can completely see their exterior section. I tried a few new editing tricks in this video. Instead of recapping the whole zoo, I tried to only recap what we did in the immediate last couple episodes. I'm also trying to incorporate a lot more cinematic shots like this one, instead of me just moving the camera around. I hope you guys appreciate it. It doesn't really take any more effort to make in these videos. Matter of fact, it probably makes it easier because it makes them a little bit shorter in the end and less to edit. I hope you guys like it. Let me know if you do. I'd really like to hear your advice, both good and bad. Anyways, I'm thinking that's going to be an end to today's very weird episode. Great news of the DLC though. I'd really care to hear what you guys have to say about that as well. Let me know. Anyways, the sun's setting on this day in the H2O zone. Kingpin out. See you real soon.